Welcome to the Dojo Exchange, the podcast where martial artists from every style, background, and organization come together to share their stories, experiences, and knowledge. Our goal is simple, to build bridges across the martial arts community by learning from one another and celebrating what unites us. Be sure to stick around to the end of the episode for the question for the audience. I have David Slizinger with us. David, can you go ahead and tell us about yourself?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. I'm a student and instructor for Mario Borg Karate, which is under a branch called Shuseikan, part of an international body Seiwakai of Goju-Ryu Karate Do. And I've been training with my Shihan, with my instructor for, we're coming up close 20 years next year. Yep. I'm a dad of three and also got a beautiful dog. I'm based in Sydney, Australia, and I instruct 2 times a week on Sundays and Tuesdays, and then I also train with my teacher, and he's got so basically between us we cover 5 days a week of training. Look, probably a familiar story. When I was young, walking down a street, broad daylight, and I was 13 years old, and literally out of nowhere, just couple of probably older kids, 15, 16, just walked past and just sort of shoulder barged me, and I turned around, and the next thing I knew, I was being attacked. They sort of hit me, and I went to the ground. It was in the middle of quite a busy area. There was people around, and I mean, these guys were actually attacking me pretty badly, and no one did anything. And I literally remember lying down on the ground and looking up at a businessman who would have been a meter away as they were sort of kicking me. And he did nothing. And it was actually an old lady who, this was back well before the days of mobile phones. And there was an old lady who eventually came up and sort of hit them with a handbag. And she said, I'm going to call the police. And then they kind of looked at her and swore at her, and then sort of moved off. And it really affected me. I'd never been really, I'm not an aggressive person, never really been into sort of street fighting or anything. And so eventually I just looked around, and my parents actually took me to a place which was Goju-Ryu Karate. My first instructor was an instructor by the name of Paul Hotz, a lifelong martial artist who was running a Goju-Ryu Karate club. And so I started training with him, and he said something that sort of stuck with me, which was, everyone has the right to their own space, and I'm going to teach you how to own your space. So that's really why I started. So I was 13 years old back then. Yeah.
That's awesome. I mean, not the attack part, but that last part there that he told you, that's awesome. So, what makes Goju-Ryu unique?
Okay. Look, I'll preface the answer because I'll speak from my own experience. There are so many people who I look up to who are much, much more experienced and knowledgeable than I am. I consider myself always a student of Goju-Ryu, but I'll talk from my own experience. So Goju-Ryu incorporates both hard and soft styles in its approach to martial arts. That is, I prefer to use the term force and flow. Its tenet is Sanshin, which literally means 3 battles, but really looks at not only your physical makeup, how you hold yourself, but it incorporates breathing and basics from the foundation of the stance all the way through to the way that you the way that you engage your muscle groups, and the very, very basics or fundamentals. And a lot of Goju-Ryu practitioners will say everything starts and ends with Sanshin, the kata. It is, it's truly a beautiful form. Looks very, very simple when a casual observer watches, but it's a lifelong journey to try and gain a high level of that. But it really is the force and the flow, the soft and the hard aspects that is great. It's also inside fighting. Goju-Ryu is known for its close quarter or inside fighting. And a lot of the time, people who don't know and watch it say that it resembles some of the Chinese fighting arts, or I've even seen people, draw other comparisons. Casual observers will say it looks, there's elements of boxing, there's elements of Muay Thai, but certainly Kung Fu and that Southern Chinese art, which is where the origins of Goju-Ryu came from. It's actually really interesting. So I am part of a group underneath. We've got two, I guess, bodies that our dojo is part of. So one of them is JKF, the Japanese Karate Federation, and so our particular dojo has a head. Our Hanshi is Fujiwara Hanshi, and he's in Omagari in Akita province in Japan. And very much, while it's extremely traditional, it's actually quite progressive in its approach. And the change is really everything has become more, first of all, it's become more practical, I think, more sensible. But visually, you would say everything has become much closer, and rather than really large movements that I sort of trained with when I was sort of training initially from the age of 13 to 18, everything has become much more compact. And it's really, really practical in that sense. So there has been a definite transition. I think the style of teaching as well. I know that not everybody has the same dojos, and each dojo is different. And to be completely honest, my attitude is, as long as you're not sitting on a couch, anything that gets your blood flow and oxygen through your body is a positive thing, regardless of what it is that people choose to do. I think it's great. So I'm not critical of others, but, we train at Mario Borg, my teacher, all of our dojos are hard wooden floors. We train in a way that still has that sort of hard element. So we do, fairly hard, kumite, and body contact and things like that, conditioning. But at the same time, we know that we need to keep students. So, I think one of the things that has changed is, I used to get hit, and sometimes would end up in tears after training, because I think things were just a little bit tougher, back in the 80s. I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing that we've got some more sort of safety focus in our training, and we do what I like to say is that these days we want people to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And so from an instructor perspective, we try and take students into spaces where they're going to be challenged, and they have to really switch on and focus. And I think that at the end of the day, you're teaching a martial art, and the origins of which are to put somebody down so that they actually can't function anymore. And I think that, we personally, we've shifted to that traditional lens. A lot of karate has moved to that sports, and you'll hear this a lot, sports versus, traditional. And I think there's a case for both. I don't see one being exclusively thing. We've just chosen that more traditional style. We're not really interested in points, but once a year we do get together as, because there is a sort of tournament. And so once a year, we do embrace that ourselves, although during the year we don't train towards that.
Nice. So who is your biggest influences in martial arts?
My teacher, Mario Borg. Mario Borg, Ren Shishihan, he is sixth Dan, just actually about to go to Japan now. So hopefully when this goes to air, he'll be able to say seventh. But regardless of the Dan, because I know that doesn't define the martial artist, I was looking for a long time when my first dojo closed. My first dojo closed just because my instructor unfortunately had a non-karate related accident and had to close the shop. And I was looking for quite a while. And then I stopped looking, kept karate in my life for about, 10, 15 years, and then started up. And I saw Mario training. I just knew straight away he had the perfect balance. And for me, karate is about, a martial art is about balance. He had the perfect balance of discipline, of pushing his students, but he's just got a very humble and gentle way of instructing. He leads by example. He's not going to ask you to do something that he doesn't do. And he's probably been the anchor for me throughout sort of the last 20 years, certainly. And I, will continue to be. So he's certainly somebody who's had a huge impact on me. There are some other martial artists as well that I hold in really high regard, that I've had the opportunity to train with, or that I still do train with. But in terms of probably my biggest influence, certainly initially it was Paul Hotz, who was my instructor, and now Mario Borg. So he's become a mentor, a friend, but really somebody who I look up to, because in life, you need to get balance, and he sort of affords that perfect balance. Of course, our style is Goju-Ryu, right? And our head is, it came from Chojo Miyagi. So, of course, I was influenced back in the day by the Karate Kid. Although you won't see us doing any crane techniques in the dojo, standing on one leg. But as a young person growing up in the 80s, who wasn't into that? So yeah.
That's funny that you mentioned that. I recently found out that Cobra Kai, like the show, is Taekwondo. I didn't know that. And I found out that Cobra Kai was Taekwondo. And I'm like, no way.
Yeah, I haven't actually watched the new series. I've got this sort of nostalgia back in my head about wax on, wax off, and I'm too scared to to break that with it. But no, it's good. And look, the one thing I will say about mentorship is the community that I train in, regardless of whether they're senior instructors or students, there is just an amazing willingness to share knowledge. And that is something that I find not unique to martial arts, but certainly it is one of the things that I admire about the community. Is, I'll be training with somebody I've never met before, and they'll just say, "Hey, Dave, just move your elbow this way a little bit more. It's going to give you, and I'll walk away with something." And I think in order to sort of be open to that as well is really important, to have that thing of I sort of see myself as a student, not as an instructor, even though I do teach. I just always see myself as a student, because you can learn from anyone, I can, and teaching helps you learn as well. So
Yeah, like you never stop learning. What do you enjoy most about teaching?
look, teaching is incredible, because you can actually see people progress in themselves as people and as martial artists as well, obviously. We have people from the ages of, I think our youngest student is about 11 years old, and our oldest student is 76 years old. And Mario actually has younger he even has younger students than that. So across our dojo, just seeing the development of people and seeing the way that I guess it's that strange balance between confidence and humility that you actually see developing in people. I mean, just recently I had a student who's going through some stuff in his life. He's an adult and he's going through some stuff. And he said, karate's been it's my midlife crisis anchor. Hearing people say that sort of thing, and even watching kids sometimes who the first time they walk into the dojo, they can't even make eye contact. I've got one kid who when he did his first grading, he actually couldn't do the grading. He just didn't have it in him. And now, he bounds into class and bows and can't wait to start. So just that development and I guess the confidence that you can give somebody in themselves is what I like the most. I also really love watching what I call these kind of light bulb moments that happen, because I think development it's not an even path. I think we train, and it's very repetitive. And we've got it's not a huge club that we have, but the people who are there to get better. And then occasionally, and I certainly see this in myself, there'll be a spike because you just get it. At one point, it's like, I just get that particular technique. Now it makes sense to me. And all of a sudden, you'll literally see that student accelerate. So I love seeing those little spikes in their development and their understanding of the art. And I certainly had that myself. For years and years, I was doing blocks and honestly just going through the motions, and Goju is much, much more than, just, your sort of standard of, I'm going to block and then I'm going to punch. And it's so much more than that, because the blocks become the attack, and it's about controlling. It's not just about defending. And, there's a whole range of understanding that I've got as a martial artist as I progress. And, that's what I love. I love seeing that in students, just that spike. It's been the one thing that's probably kept me on an even mentally, on an even path. I think I've got an amazing life, wonderful family, but there's always challenges. For me, it's like an anchor. It's like something that grounds me. To be completely honest, if I don't train, I'm just not as nice a person. I really do find that it grounds me in my life. We all have challenges and everyone is relative. And, to be honest, everyone's got their things in life. And I've had an amazing life and continue to do so. But at the same time, there's been ups and downs. And it just gives me the ability to ground myself. And there are sometimes, of course, we do spiral out of control. And, I certainly don't look at myself as somebody who is without faults or flaws. And I think in some ways martial arts helps you to understand, or has helped me to understand myself in that way as well. We strive for betterment. I don't like to say perfection, because perfection is such an abstract concept, but I think we strive for betterment in our lives. I think practically the one thing that martial arts has done, because I'm not a particularly disciplined person in my, like, naturally, I'm a little bit scattered. And so just the ich, ni, san, chi, go, well, just that do 10 more, keep going, don't stop. And I think that resilience, which is quite practical, it's not sort of a, concept, it's actually what you do in the dojo. And I think that is something that's related to my life. So yeah, it certainly has helped me become the person that I am. I'm not to say that people who don't do martial arts can't develop these things, because I think there's many things in life that you can. But I think martial arts has a unique aspect in that it's quite easy to be able to draw that analogy between dojo and your life.
At a certain point, you start seeing martial arts everywhere. If it's been part of your life for so long.
We joke, Mario and I, we literally joke about that, whether you're closing a door or turning the wheel of a car, it literally is everywhere, walking upstairs, holding yourself and just keeping your body. I mean, yeah. And also just being kind, I think, being kind and respectful. There's an element of Ray or Budo, and I don't speak Japanese, so I automatically will say that these concepts I probably pronounce incorrectly, and I may not even grasp the intended meanings. So, but Ray being respect, which is formally seen as bowing in and bowing out, and respecting people older, more experienced, those sort of things are inherent, and they become. I think they're really, really important actually these days. I think the other thing that I have found personally is there's a lot of information being thrown at us all the time and constantly, electronic media and all these things just constantly bombarding. And in karate, we have when you're doing either standing or seated, it's called mokuso, which is like people would say, oh, you're closing your eyes and you're breathing. It's like quietening the mind. But I have seen it in myself, and I've also seen it in students who, when they start, they literally can't be still. They just don't have it in them to stop. And karate has given me in my life that ability to understand the importance of stopping and being in that space and in that moment, and not necessarily having to do a lot all the time, but just to take stock and that's something that I've incorporated from that. And I mean, I train every day. Even when I'm walking so I do a dog walk every day. I've got a dog, and every single day I do Sanshin Kata 3 times when I take my dog for a walk, rain, hail or shine. And it's just that time that I put aside in my day to do that.
Yeah. I really liked how you talked about the character aspect. In Taekwondo, we have the tenets of Taekwondo. We have courtesy, integrity, self-control, dominant spirit, perseverance. So it's really nice seeing that across the board of martial arts. Even if it's not the same exact thing, it's still the same thing.
Yeah. Look, I think it begins and ends with respect, right? And I think, to be honest, I don't think that I think that, there are horses for courses, right? There are people who suit certain dojos, and, I've been outside of my dojo every now and then, particularly when we have breaks in the summertime. I'll go and explore some other places, Krav Maga, kickboxing, and things like that. The thing that keeps bringing me back to the dojo is that element of discipline and respect. And the discipline is interesting because I think a lot of parents particularly look at their kids and go, wow, since they've started karate, I've noticed that they're just a bit more disciplined in their daily life. And I don't expect it to be life changing. You're not going to, completely mold somebody from, a couple of weeks time of training. But I think over time, the discipline that you have in the dojo and the respect that you see in the dojo does translate. Yeah, ours is, I mean, we don't have a formal, our style. We just call it Goju-Ryu. So it's all down from Japan, and it's all sort of very linear in terms of the way that it's taught, so that there's an element of quality control across all of the dojos of our style. But certainly we call it I should say I call it respect focus and intent. And when we train, I want people to show respect. I want them to be able to focus. In fact, focus for me is probably one of the most important things, because I don't believe in lazy students. So if I see people who are lazy, I'd prefer them to actually bow out, leave the class, because they're not going to learn anything when they're lazy. They just won't. And that could be just that they're distracted, or they went to a birthday party beforehand, or they've had a really big weekend or whatever. So I'm not going to judge somebody, but I just don't want to be. That's one thing that I really don't like is that. So focus is important. Focus is important. And also intent. And intent goes to what I consider to be the reason why a martial art is a martial art. It's not a gym activity. It's not dancing. It's not just choreographed movements. You're learning in a violent and unpredictably violent situation for the martial art to kick in that split second, and for you to be able to react. And whether that be understanding that you have been hit before, because you trained at a level that is appropriate to your development and your body, and you sort of know what you can do. But intent is really important, because there's no point in me training, doing the movements, and then not being able to actually execute if God forbid the time comes. Cool.
Yeah, the one thing martial arts has taught me is that respect is a universal language. Like, no matter what walk of life we come from, it's something that we can all speak and understand. And I wouldn't have learned that if it wasn't for martial arts.
Yeah, I think there's a innate. The thing that I've found is that respect needs to be reciprocal. Is that I'm very happy to afford respect to people on the basis that it's reciprocal, and I'd be happy to instigate that respect always. But there are people in the world for whatever reason, in any walk of life, whether it be in business, out socially, or even in the martial arts, where there's an element of, whatever it is that doesn't show that respect. And quite often it's the ego of that person, or the insecurity maybe of that person. And that can sometimes reveal itself with a lack of respect. And I don't know, maybe it's just that I'm getting older. If somebody doesn't show me respect, I just don't. I'm not going to kowtow to people, unless there's an element of reciprocity. And I find that 99% of the time that happens, certainly in the martial arts community. But yeah, there's a lot of. We live in a very safe country. Australia's a very safe country, despite what social media will have you believe. We can walk down the street for most people. Unfortunately, in Australia, most violence is domestic. Happens in the home. But there are times, I play music outside of karate, and I spend a fair bit of time in venues and things, and I've seen plenty of punch ups and things like that. Whether it's drugs, alcohol, whatever it is that's fueling it, underneath, that respect is not there. Because if this respect was there, regardless of how much somebody has to drink or whatever, they're not going to start throwing. And I think, that's why I always say, people say, oh, alcohol is terrible, or the drugs are terrible. It's like, well, maybe it's the person who we need to be looking at in the social setting, that somebody would actually disrespect someone in the worst way, which is physical violence. So, respect is a huge, huge part of it.
So you play guitar, you play drums. What do you do?
I actually play the keys. I play the keys. I play old style 70s rock and roll and blues music. So yeah, I love it. It's awesome. So I get out. I'm not going to promote it here, but there is there's a band called I'll say it's called For the Love of Purple, which is a Deep Purple cover band, and that's fun. And I also play a few other things, but it's good. I love it.
Yeah, if you got a band, man, go ahead and promote it. If you have an album online, let everybody listen to it.
Yeah, no, it's all good. I enjoy music. I enjoy share. I mean, particularly sharing music, and you know, you see somebody who's just smiling when they're listening to something. It's just a great thing to do. So, but yeah, but you know, yeah. But in my life is pretty much, you know, family first, and then after family, it's you know, it's training, and then occasionally I'll have a jam and get out and play. So, and of course I've got a day job. So, you know, so that's right. You do, a very good, a very responsible job you've got. I know as a first responder as well. So hats off to you.
Thank you, thank you. So, if you could leave some advice to the next generation of martial artists, what would it be?
Oh, that's a good question. To the next generation of I would say understand the roots of the martial art. Never neglect the basics, the, the foundations, the stances, the basics. Work on technique over rapidity of growth, and keep a realism in your training. Make sure that it's functional. Yeah, that's the stuff that means the most to me. Explore things. Like it's great to explore things. But go back to what the roots are, because they're there for a purpose. And more often than not, you can extrapolate out, you know, meaning and scenarios and things like that. But if your basics aren't there, and that's why we always train, you know, Kihon, which is basics, kata, the 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 synchronized movements, that represent different scenarios and understanding levels, and then kumite, the in class fighting, and through those three aspects, you know, you look at bunkai, the applications, you look at, you know, this might not work for somebody who's my, you know, my physical, if I'm a you know, different body type or a different age, or think that particular thing might not work. And I got to be honest with you, the thing that I love and hate at the moment is, you ask me what would I tell, I would say by all means look at the different things, keep your mind open, right, by all means, but keep it real, because I it frustrates me when I see people, mainly online, when I see people think that, you know, if I put my finger on that spot particularly and then turn it that way, I'm going to be able to control somebody and hit that nerve point perfectly. And it, you're in a bar, you turn your head, somebody smashes you, you need to be able to turn around. It is ugly. And violence is ugly, and it's fast and brutal. And so keep things real. And that's what my whole thing is: keep your martial art grounded in its basics. By all means, explore it, but be real. Don't try and kid yourself that, you know, if you're teaching a kid to fight, you know, teach them to keep their elbows in front of their body. Teach them to protect their head. You know, teach them that to breathe. You know, the basics are what's gonna help. And I mean, thankfully in life, I've only actually had to use martial arts once. And, you know, for me, it wasn't the technique, it was the brutality of the moment. And in that moment, I was able to actually breathe. And that was what saved me. It's that fight or flight. You know, do you curl up in a ball because it's petrifying? So that's what martial arts should be. Your dojo should be a place where people go, "Oh, this is awesome," but it also should be a place where you go, "You know what? I'm actually really uncomfortable. I'm a bit scared. I'm a bit freaked out." And that's not a bad thing when it's done, as you said, covered in respect with all of that stuff, and you know that the people are there to help you develop. But, you know, if you cop one here or there, or you end up with a bit of a blood lip, or you've got some bruising or whatever, well, you're learning a martial art, right? So you're conditioning yourself like somebody who jumps out of a plane, the most unnatural thing to do, but they do it over and over again until it becomes something that is normal. And I think a lot of the time we kid ourselves as martial artists. I've seen it where, somebody can think that they can do things that might have meaning in a static or a consensual environment. But as soon as you take it outside of that consensual environment, as soon as there is chaos and anger and violence and intent to hurt, it quite often can go out the window. So, I sort of really look to, and people mistake that for being tough. You want to be tough. It's like, no, just be real. Like, just, you don't have to be a tough guy or a tough woman to train in a way that has meaning. You just need to look at things in a functional way, because that's the reason why I'm. Yeah, we don't do a lot of sort of situational things like, hold my hand, then you turn this way, then you can do this, and from that, then you can do this. So we do those sort of things to explore concepts, and the concepts can be taken, but then let's look what happens when somebody's in the dojo and just walks up and just, boy, get it back out of my face. And that's what we do. And we do it in class. And, we'll push someone to the ground, and we'll see. And what happens when, we've got people in our class who do BJJ and do Muay Thai and let them go. Like, don't say, oh, you can't do that because that's not Goju. Let them go. Let's see how that plays out. I got submitted recently by somebody, and I learned from it. Don't get that situation again. This is what I need to do next time, and I don't want to be on the ground in a street fight. I don't want to be on the ground. I want to be running away or putting the person down and then running away. So, I want to be able to hold myself, and I think part of that is just, how do you hold yourself? Are you the person that's going to be picked on? And I think secondary is, be exposed to unpredictable, non-consensual violence in a way that you can't do everything. Obviously, you're not going to poke someone's eyes out and, attack their throat, but as real as it can get in the dojo, I think as an instructor, that's what we have. That's my personal belief. And I mean, that's what I've been trained to do. And certainly the people who I respect in the martial art, train with an element of realism and functionality in their martial arts, but they still practice basics and they still have that discipline, and it's still a martial art. It's not just, it's not random chaos.
I agree with everything you said. Whenever shit hits the fan, so to say, when your sympathetic nervous system's engaged, when it's fight or flight, all that stuff's out the window. Your fine motor skills disappear, and your life's going to depend on the basics at that point.
Yeah. I mean, the very first thing that, obviously you want to get some coordination and these sort of things. And martial arts is not, that's the other thing, is it's a journey. So, I'd say to people, strap in, because you can go and learn a self-defense system that's very effective in 1/10 of the time that it takes to be an effective martial artist. Like, they exist. And they're great. So if you want to learn how to defend yourself in a very short period of time, I would not necessarily say, getting to a level of blah, blah, blah is going to take you, 8 years. Some people don't have that commitment in their life. So it really depends, again, what the student is after. But if somebody was to say to me, why would I train Goju-Ryu as opposed to a self-defense system, or why would I do that instead of going into a gym and just strapping on some gloves? My response would be, because you will learn that martial arts has a depth to it. And as a person, your character will develop and you'll become a better person. But you'll also become a weapon, and I think that it's that balance, right? It's getting that balance. Development is inside yourself, but also knowing how to hold yourself.
Absolutely. So I do have one more question, and this one's for you and the audience. So if you're listening, leave a comment in the comments in YouTube or Spotify. What is one lesson every martial artist should learn regardless of style?
What is one lesson every martial artist should learn, regardless of style? It's hard to put it into one. I think never think you're an expert. Yeah, never think of yourself as knowing everything. Yeah, always. They call it in business. They call it the growth mindset, right? Right. The growth mindset is be open to the opportunity to learn, and I think every martial artist should have internally, even if they're perceived as the best, because it's important that you see people who are at the top. Everybody should be able to, inside themselves, when they look at themselves in the mirror and no one else is around, inside themselves to say, I'm still learning. I'm still a student. I've still got a white belt on. This is my first class. I know some stuff, but there's a lot to learn. And that's the reason why for me, I'll be doing it, until I can't move anymore.
Well, David, it's been awesome talking to you. We'll have to do this again in the future.
Can you put the link to the website on? I've sent it through to you on the email. MarioBorgKarate.com.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'll link it into the description. Yep.
And and great work what you're doing, particularly with those floods and things like that. So I know. Yeah. That's really, really good. That's really noble work. So yeah, appreciate it. I'll be sending it everywhere. And can you do me a favor and just drop your physical address? Because I'll send you a badge. You asked for a badge, I'll send that through. Awesome. Have a great day.